Hey, what's up, and welcome to QnA, the show where I take your questions from YouTube, Twitter, and everywhere in between and answer them here in video format. Just a quick reminder, if you want to make sure that your questions can make it on the show, make sure you're following me on Twitter at KWEN_C. Also, make sure you're subscribed and notified so you can be clearly notified when I put up the question prompt. Some days I do Q&A a day earlier because of scheduling conflicts with different guests that I'm trying to bring on during the game week. This is one of those where Q&A usually comes on a Friday, but today it's coming on a Thursday. And this first question is from Adam, who says this. Hey Q, heard you bring up before something maybe switching to 4-3 to a 3-4 next season. What would you think would be some pros and cons with that with this roster? Now, it's kind of a different question, right? It's like, which will you primarily do more? Because a lot of teams run hybrid systems, and 3-4s are just kind of being phased out the NFL right now. Teams are much more comfortable running 4-3s, and if they feel like they want to run a heavier front, they'll just run a 5-2 flat. So I don't know if anybody comes in and like just switches up to a 3-4 because it's been a minute since that's been done in mass. But yeah, I think the benefit from 3-4 would be where you would focus your personnel. Because right now in the 4-3, you're not going to focus your personnel on IDL, inside defensive line. In a 3-4, you kind of have no choice but to, because 3 techs become a lot more important in 3-4 systems just because there's more of them out there, right? And remember, 3-4, the 3 refers to the 3 down linemen technically, so the 3 techs. Now, the thing that you will not like about a 3-4, which a lot of y'all complain about even now in the 4-3 when it barely happens, is that Miles is going to be in coverage more often than he is now. If you do switch to a 3-4, and maybe that helps him, maybe that doesn't, but that's going to be something that would happen in a 3-4. Do I prefer one over the other? I don't really care. I think more the philosophy in the expertise is more important than whatever system that they want to run. But yeah, there are definitely some pros and cons to each. 3-4s are usually better with run defense. 3-4s are usually easier to get 3 techs for. You can have a traditional nose tackle in a 3-4, which is helpful for stopping the run. But if your overall team philosophy is not worried about stopping the run, then you're not going to go to a 3-4. The next question comes from Vaughn, who says, with this roster as it stands, is it possible to see noticeable progression primarily in the defense towards the end of the season? I don't know, man. Here's where I'm at with it. I think the defense is what it is, and that is a inconsistent mess. Like, that's what I think the defense is. I think the defense is just a inconsistent mess, and that is what it's going to be. Some games are going to look great. Some games are going to look terrible. They're just inconsistent at this point. I don't think that they progress notably in one direction. And even if they do, it should be looked at as more of a coincidence than it is a chart of progression at this point. We have seen this defense be streaky too many times for us to start to believe that, because they got 3 in a row, right? Like, it's like, who's a good example with this in the NFL? Who's a really streaky player? I can think of basketball players that are streaky, right? It's like guys like Karis LeVert and J.R. Smith. Early in their career, when they were streaky, it was kind of a question of, hey, are they just streaky, or is who they are when they're streaking what they're going to be? And then eventually we just found out, no, these guys are kind of streaky. That's what the defense is right now. That's what the defense is. Ashton Backlov says, what are some of the advantages that Watson will bring to the offense? Do I agree? I do agree that he will open up more lanes, but do you think you can see an expanded role for Hunt and DPJ? DPJ's been quietly having a good season. I don't think the roles are going to get any bigger for Hunt or DPJ. But the opportunities are probably going to get bigger because what Deshaun's going to be able to do is get to deeper parts in his progression and throw more accurate footballs than Jacoby Brissett. Also, what Deshaun's going to be able to do is what, like, Jacoby's good at, if he has to scramble for yards, he can do that, but he's not necessarily a guy who extends plays through the air, right? He's not going to break out the pocket and then throw on the run. It's very rare that Jacoby Brissett does that. Watson does do that a lot. So you can get some expanded plays, some scramble drill plays from that. I think I'm at the point to where, like, I've explained a lot about what Watson can bring to the offense, but in order for it to really stick with people, I think you just have to see it, and we're so close to seeing it. So I think we'll see. He's going to bring a lot of change to the offense. Next question comes from Luke, who says, how much do you think a bad defensive and position coach is limiting the talent on that side? It seems like Bill Callahan can bring it to the offensive line guys with low value, elevate them to reach their potential. But on defense, the guys are successful that already are successful and respected. They just underperform, and it seems like they don't buy in at all. Same with special teams. I don't know if this is coaching when it comes to the development. And like Bill Callahan, comparing any coach to Bill Callahan is kind of rough because he's one of the best like offensive line coaches to ever do it. But I would say this: Bill's job's a little bit different than the defensive line coach's job. Offensive line is a collaborative effort. So by nature, you can be hurt by a couple of bad players, but a couple of good players can also carry some bad players. And that's what happens on offensive lines all the time. If you have enough good players, you can carry the bad ones, right? And the Browns have been blessed enough to have at least 1, 2, 3 guys in the center that are going to be really good, and then the tackles, sometimes it's Jed Wills and he's playing all right, and sometimes it's Jack Conklin, but like they've had immense talent. Like I think that's the part that we're kind of skipping over when we make that comp, is that the investment on the offensive line versus the interior of the defensive line has not been similar from a front office standpoint. Now, is the lack of development on this defensive line, the fact that we can't get a young player to be able to be NFL quality, is that partly on the defensive line coaches? Of course that's on the defensive line coaches. But I don't think they're going to be miracle workers. Like, I don't think there's much you can get out of Tommy Togiai. I don't think there's much more you can get out of Jordan Elliott. I just don't think those were good picks. And if the defensive line coach is one of the big factors in why they picked those players, then that's their fault. But as far as developing them, I can't squeeze more juice out of a lemon than what's in there. And they have had some very dry lemons drafted to this team, right? Like, I just don't know what else there is to do with Tommy Togiai, or where you can put him in a position to be successful. If he can't hold his ground one-on-one, he can't hold it. And I think that's been the biggest problem. You look at the offensive line, we spent resources, capital R, on the offensive line. Defensive line, yeah, Miles is there, Jadeveon's there, but we ain't got nothing in the middle. And maybe we need to let Jadeveon go so we can spend money in the middle, and maybe Alex Wright can step up, and that'll be better for the team next year. But that's the problem. It's the resources that have been spent there have not been spent well. Third-round picks, not getting good players with those third-round picks at the defensive line. Well, only one third-round pick. Not getting a good player there with that third-round pick you spent there. And then the other guy is Tommy Togiai with the fifth-round pick, which is like whatever at that point. Again, it's the lack of resources, I think, that have been spent on that position that has caused it to be bad. The coaching and everything else has not helped, but the main problem is that you don't have starting caliber players because you haven't spent starting caliber resources on that position, in my opinion. The next question comes from the Brown Tiger, says, both teams are from the north and both deal with cold, wind, and snow. If it does snow, he's talking about this week's game, does it really favor one team or the other? I don't think so. We could talk about how the Browns are running the ball and how that's going to favor us because we can run the ball. Dog, have you not watched this defense try to tackle in regular weather? You think we're going to tackle Josh Allen in snow? Man, you better than me if you think that. I think this is going to be, the game is going to be, and look, the Browns can win this. It depends on what defense shows up. If the garbage Browns defense from last week shows up, then we're not winning this game, whether it's rain, snow, sleet, hail, or in the dome. It does not matter. If we can't tackle, we're not winning a game. So, and especially a game against the Bills, because maybe Devin Singletary is not the greatest running back of all time, but if you can't find him and you can't tackle him, he's going to look good. And let's not even talk about the fact that Josh Allen is out there. I don't know why people are acting like this snow makes it an automatic dub for the Browns. It does not. It's not even close to that. But yeah, that's boggled my mind, the attitude people have had about this. But I don't think it matters one way or the other, whether this game gets played in the snow or not. I don't think that's the main point. The main point is, what are you going to do to tackle Josh Allen? What defense is showing up this week? Are we going to tackle this week? We're more than capable of doing it. The question is, are they going to do it? That's the real question. Because if it snows, that ain't going to make nobody tackle more if they ain't planning on tackling. Charlie with this question, is OBJ coming back to Cleveland a real possibility? Absolutely not. Why do we keep asking this? He said himself he ain't coming back. He's not coming back. He was never coming back. This was never a real shot of happening. And for the reasons that I've explained a million times, it was never happening. Chris with the next question says, do you think we're playing this game in snow? If so, that puts us in advantage. It's kind of a similar question than the one that was asked before. So again, I'll say probably like it doesn't matter. It's about tackling at the end of the day. If this defense were competent, I would say yes. But since this defense has proven to be inconsistent and incompetent, we'll have to see what happens on Sunday. Noah Brown says it's a very small rumor depending on whether this game will be relocated to Detroit. How would this factor into the game? I think the most important factor in this game is not where it's played, is not the conditions that it's played under. It's which Browns defense shows up. Not which one is it easier to show up, which one shows up. That's it. They can win this game in Detroit, in the Dome. They could win this game in Buffalo in the snow, and they can lose in both of those other scenarios. It's not about the weather. It's not about where the game's being played. It's about what Browns team's going to show up. That's the most important part. Nobody's talking about that. We're talking about, if it's going to be a snow bowl, like it's going to be a free dub. It's not about the snow. It don't matter. Buffalo plays in the snow more than Cleveland does. How is that an advantage for us? Seriously. Why do we think the snow is an advantage for us when Buffalo has done it, that core group has done it, within the last 4 years? We ain't done that. When the last time the Browns played in the Snow Bowl? Like 10 years. None of those dudes that were on that team 10 years ago are on this team. Why do we think this is an advantage? It does not matter if this game is played under snow. It does not matter if this game is played in a dome. What matters is what team actually shows up. Because if the defense doesn't show up like it did against Baltimore, like it did against Cincinnati, we're going to be in for a long Sunday, whether that's in the snow or in a dome. Don't fool yourself. The snow is not going to cover up the fact that the Browns defense sometimes plays historically awful. The key word there is sometimes, though. Maybe they will, maybe they won't. That's what we need to figure out. Which defense is showing up? The Bills don't run a ton of misdirection. I have some faith that the good defense is going to show up this week. But that's the question, man. That's really it. But that's it for Q&A. Y'all have a great day. Have a good night.